So here's all you need for a successful startup. Fantastic, right? You all have that? 100% experienced people, superior leadership, thorough planning, full cooperation from government, unions, and management. Fantastic, right? Actually, the 134A project in Corpus was pretty close there. We were a non-union plant. We were saving the ozone layer. So we had full support from our management and the local officials, all the environmental officials and so forth were strong supporters. And I could tell you stories, examples of that. We did all that planning stuff we talked about in topic B. We certainly had superior leadership, right? Okay, folks, superior leadership. Okay, just a little joke. Where we did come up short was 100% experienced people. Our operators were 50% experienced, had 25 years of service. 50% were new hires right off the street. Former postal workers, farmers, ranchers. Okay, very successful startup. So you can do it with less than that, but you better do some things to make it happen. So this is going to be the basis. I wanted to go through this chart before we finish for the day. And it's going to be the basis for our staffing discussion tomorrow. Make sure you understand what this chart is and what it is not. But what this represents are the actual man months expended, okay? This is not the staffing plan. These are the results from 3 major projects. Now, those projects were a major ammonia plant. One of them was an ethylene plant, and one of them was a combined high-density, low-density polyethylene plant. Now, if you think about those operations, I would say, they were clearly not new technology. I would say in terms of today's dollars, probably, what do you think? Your guess is as good as mine there. $500 million, $500 million, maybe more. Pretty good sized projects, not new technology. And what Bill did, he had the actual man months for each of those projects for if you look up here at the top, right here is where we introduced feedstock, okay? So this is the beginning of startup. So what you have is the 12 months before you introduce feeds and the 6 months after you introduce feeds, okay? Now this shows we had quality production after 1 month. So they had a 1 month startup, right? So that means what you have here is 1 month of startup and 5 months of stabilization. And you see 2 columns for everything other than the salaried project folks. You see a production number and a ratio. And what you see on the right-hand side is the standard staff. Standard staff is what the plant was expected to need once project objectives have been achieved and the plant is running the way it's supposed to run. Routine operation, this is the standard staff. This ratio number, and again, I should have said it in case this chart is in the book. You may be able to see it better in the book than you can on your screen. But that ratio, if you look at production, salaried production people, 12 months before first feeds, you had 10 salaried production people. In the future, long term, you expect to have 14. So 10 divided by 14 is 0.7. So that says I had 70% of my salaried production staff on board 12 months before first feeds. I'm up to 1, so I have 14 10 months before. And you can see the ratio increases, and I end up peaking out at a ratio of about 1.7. Now, if that's what the ratio means, it's the number of people that are there versus the long-term standard staff. What does a ratio greater than 1 mean? Any guesses? I know this is a quick group.
We have to pay more on labor work, right?
It means you are getting extra resources from someplace else, right? When you're at 14, you've hired all your permanent production salaried people. So if I'm going, that's my ratio of 1, 14 divided by 14. So if I'm up here at 1.7, I either have my salaried production people working 70% overtime, or I have brought in some supplemental help, borrowed some people from another operating area, hired some contractors, whatever. All right. So any questions about that? Does that make sense? Now these actual numbers, again, the way Bill got them, he had the actual staffing from these projects, from these 3 projects. For any month, he would add them up for each of those 3 projects, add them up and divide by 3. So this is the average number for all 3 projects. This is not the number that any one team had. This is not the total number for all 3 teams. This is the average number that those folks had. You can't reach any conclusions by the actual number. I mean, actual staffing depends so much on your role definitions, the type of process you have, how instrumented it is, and so forth. I think the numbers that are relevant are the ratios. Okay? So when you look at your staffing plan and you see that you've come up with ratios much different from these, it doesn't say you're wrong, but you ought to have a good reason for thinking you're going to need so many fewer people than these actual projects did. Okay, we've finished for the day, but I'd like to finish the discussion of this chart before we break, because this is where we're going to pick it up in the morning. So is it clear? Now, again, schedules don't necessarily mean anything either. So what we've shown is where key milestones were across the top, okay? Here's where first feeds were. Startup was over here. Here was mechanical completion, okay? So you had 2 months of commissioning the rest of the plant before you introduced first feeds. Now, we also show here was your initial process unit turnover. Here was your utilities turnover, all right? So what you're seeing here is that you started getting your first process unit turnover 5 months before you started. Here's where you started commissioning, right? Your utilities were turned over 7 months before first feeds. So, guarantee you've started commissioning something 7 months before first feeds. 5 months before you're mechanically complete. And then once you have everything turned over, still takes you another 2 months to get the plant commissioned and ready for feedstock. So take a look at the numbers, take a look at the ratios. I think you can see why the numbers increase at certain points of time and so forth. And tomorrow we'll talk about what these numbers mean to you. What else? You can't use the numbers without thinking, but I think it is a good benchmark for your own planning. The one other thing I would say is I would have to assume that, as well as being not new technology projects, these were probably schedule-driven projects. And I say that mostly because basically when it comes time for commissioning and startup, almost every project is. You want that thing running as soon as possible. Now, if you don't want to hire and to staff your people this heavily, or you can't get this many people, then you have the option of spreading it out, right? Instead of doing this over a 12-month period of time, maybe you do it in 18 months, all right? And then you don't need quite the same ratio of people. But if you're a schedule-driven project and you're trying to get it done as quickly as possible, then you ought to be thinking about, how are we going to get this many resources? So, any questions about that chart before we finish up for today? I want to make sure you understand it as you think about it overnight. Okay. Now, I'm sure, I don't know how these numbers strike you. Most people, when they see these numbers for the first time, they are stunned, as I was when I did my first project. And I said, holy cow, I can't believe we're going to need that many people. I can't believe we're going to be able to get that many people. But, and to be quite honest, when we developed our staffing plan, we ended up projecting numbers a little bit lower than this for a couple of reasons. For one reason, I said, if you're doing a project right, you shouldn't need as many people. And we were committed to doing it right. And I did ask Bill Tillman, were these projects that had attended the seminar? Is that how he got the number? And he said, no, these were not projects that had come to the seminar and were executed using the principles that we are talking about. These were typical projects that he got the data elsewhere, done by whatever the typical techniques at the time were. And, you know, so again, I figure if you're doing it right, you should need not quite the same peak number of people. But, and I'll show you those numbers tomorrow, but believe me, it's not night and day. Our numbers weren't that different. If you are schedule driven and you want to get this thing done as quickly as possible, you need to be looking at ratios like these numbers. So I had somebody come to the seminar and say, oh, we're not going to work any over. We're not going to get any outside help. We're going to do it all with our team. Okay, that's fine. You can, you know, you can do that. Don't tell me you're a schedule-driven project. Okay, I mean, if that's that is certainly one realistic option. If you want to just do it with your people and you're going to decide, okay, we'll work 30, 40%, whatever you think is a sustainable level of overtime for a year or more, you know, that is certainly a strategic option you have. But if it is, then you better be sure that you reflect it appropriately in your commissioning and startups.